Flower power.
2 words.
2 words. And I'm willing to bet that for, 99% of people listening, those 2 words just summoned a very specific mental image.
Oh, absolutely. It's instantaneous. You're thinking tie-dye shirts, you're thinking acoustic guitars, maybe a VW bus.
Right. The Summer of Love,
Yeah,
San Francisco.
yeah.
It was the ultimate 1960s cliche, peace, love, and, that whole vibe. But here's the thing about today's deep dive, and this is why I love doing this. We're going to take that one image, that single moment, and we are going to completely shatter it.
That is the plan. We are stripping away the tie-dye.
Because when we started digging into the sources, I realized flower power isn't just about hippies. It's this massive, multi-layered concept. We're talking about high-stakes political strategy, sure, but also neurological responses in the brain.
And complex ecological networks in our own cities and billion-dollar retail innovation. It's really wild how this one idea, the power of a flower, just spans so many different fields.
I mean, look at our sources for today. It's an incredibly eclectic mix.
It is. We've got historical accounts of the Vietnam War protests, business case studies of this huge Australian garden center chain, and then data from a fundraising platform.
Not to mention these dense scientific papers on pollinator ecology and art therapy. It is a strange mix, but I promise it all connects.
It does.
Our mission today is to explore the literal power of flowers, how they manipulate our psychology, how they drive commerce, how they stabilize ecosystems, and how they've been weaponized, peacefully, of course, for political change.
Right. It's about using the flower as a tool, a lever to move the world.
Exactly. So let's start with the classic definition. We all know the slogan. But where did flower power actually come from? Because most people assume it just sort of, floated out in the ether.
Yeah, that it was just something people started saying. But it actually has a very specific author. The term was coined by the beat poet Allen Ginsberg in 1965.
Allen Ginsberg.
What's so fascinating is that it wasn't just a vibe or a feeling. It wasn't poetry for its own sake. It was a specific instruction.
This was from his essay, How to Make a March Spectacle.
Right, exactly. Ginsberg was looking at the anti-war movement, and he saw a problem, basically a branding problem.
A branding problem.
For a protest.
Yeah. I mean, the protests were angry, they were shouting matches, they looked really frightening to the average person watching at home on the news, and maybe more importantly, there was a physical threat.
From who?
From the Hells Angels.
Wait, the Hells Angels. The motorcycle gang.
The very same.
And they were involved in the protests.
They were, but not on the side you might think. The Hells Angels actually supported the war in Vietnam at the time, and they were threatening to violently disrupt student protests at Berkeley.
Wow. Okay.
So Ginsberg realized, if the students meet violence with more anger, if they get into a brawl with a biker gang, they lose the public instantly.
It just looks like chaos. No one wins. Exactly. So his strategy was to turn the protest into street theater. He explicitly told protesters to bring masses of flowers. He wanted them to hand flowers to the police, to the press, even to the Hells Angels.
That is a bold move.
Yeah.
Handing a daisy to a biker gang. That takes some serious nerve.
Well, it was calculated. The idea was to use the innocence of the flower to neutralize the anger. If you're holding a flower, you don't look like a threat.
Right.
It just completely disarms the aggression on the other side. I mean, how do you punch someone who's trying to hand you a rose?
And it worked visually, didn't it? We have to talk about the photos, because that strategy created some of the most enduring images of the entire century.
The imagery is it's iconic. You've got the 1967 March on the Pentagon. There's that famous photo of John Rose Casimir. She's 17 years old, holding a chrysanthemum, standing right in front of a line of soldiers with bayonets.
It's that contrast, isn't it? The soft living thing against the hard, cold steel of the weapon. It's almost perfect composition.
And then there's the other one, the flower power photo by Bernie Boston. A man actually placing carnations into the barrels of the rifles. That image, it just defined the entire movement.
So that here is that the flower wasn't just a decoration. It was a shield. It was a psychological tool to disarm the opposition.
Precisely. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is a surprise to me in the research. We tend to think of this as a uniquely American 1960s thing.
Right, the Summer of Love. We think we invented peaceful protest with nature.
But the sources point to a historical antecedent that happened 10 years earlier and in a very different political climate. China.
You're talking about the 100 Flowers campaign.
Yes, from 1956. The slogan was, "Let 100 flowers bloom, let 100 schools of thought contend." Now, we should be clear, the political outcome there was very different, and it did lead to a crackdown. But the source notes that Mao and the PRC used floral imagery everywhere, on stage decorations, in newspapers, on clothing. So this idea of using flowers for political messaging, it's not new at all. It's a kind of universal language.
Which brings us to the big question,
What?
why? Why does it work?
Yeah.
Why does a flower disarm a soldier? Why do we care so much about, at the end of the day, it's just a plant's reproductive organ.
This is where we pivot to the neuroscience, because Ginsburg, whether he knew it or not, was basically hacking the human brain. We have this fascinating study from Frontiers in Human Neuroscience.
Right, the one called Observing versus Creating Flowers. And the study was great because it really gets into the wiring. They compared how people reacted to 3 different things.
Right. They showed them photos of real flowers, drawings of flowers, and then mandalas.
And mandalas, for anyone who doesn't know, are those really complex, symmetrical geometric patterns.
Yeah.
People use them for meditation, right, to get focused and calm.
Exactly. So you'd assume, because they're designed for that, that the mandalas would be the winner in the calmness category. That's the whole pitch.
That's what I would have thought. But the findings were pretty stark. The researchers found that real flowers, even just photos of them, induced the highest levels of happiness and calmness.
And they actually measured it physiologically. They didn't just ask people, hey, how do you feel?
No, they didn't. They used near-infrared spectroscopy. And here's the science part. Looking at fresh roses actually decreased oxyhemoglobin in the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, let's unpack that. For us non-neuroscientists, what does decreased oxyhemoglobin mean?
It means the brain relaxed. It lowered the energy demand in the part of your brain that handles complex decisions and anxiety. It also increased parasympathetic nervous activity.
So that's the rest and digest system.
Exactly, not the fight or flight system. Looking at a rose literally chills you out on a biological level. It's like a visual sedative.
So what about the mandalas then?
The mandalas aroused interest. People found them stimulating. They were engaged looking at the patterns. But they didn't get that same emotional connection or mood boost that the flower gave them.
That's a huge distinction. Interest versus calm. And what about the drawings of flowers? Surely a beautiful painting of a rose would work too.
Well, this was the art versus reality finding. Even the artistic drawings didn't have the same effect as photos of real flowers. Participants said the drawings were a bit more boring, or they'd focus on the technique.
Oh, like look at the brush strokes here.
Right. They were judging the art, not feeling the flower. The researchers talk about the gestalt of a real flower. There's an evolutionary embodied connection we have to the real thing that art just can't quite replicate.
We're hardwired for it.
Exactly. For millions of years, flowers signaled food, water, safety. So seeing one is a deep primal signal to our brain to just relax.
Which explains why the flower in the gun barrel is so jarring. You have a symbol of safety jammed into a symbol of pure destruction. Your brain just has to stop and process that contrast.
Okay, so flowers change human behavior, but obviously they weren't designed for us. They drive behavior in the natural world. Let's talk about the ecological power of flowers.
Right. If we're talking about flower power in a literal sense, we have to talk about the power source. The pollinators. And we have studies here from the Journal of Applied Ecology looking at urban environments, like Glasgow.
And the setting here is so important. We're not talking about wild meadows. We're talking about our backyards.
Private gardens. In a place like Great Britain, private gardens make up around 30% of all urban green space. That's a huge chunk of land. They're not just pretty, they are vital conservation hubs.
But there's a conflict in the data, isn't there? The classic debate, native versus non-native plants. If you ask a hardcore gardener about this, it's like asking about politics.
It is the eternal debate. And the general rule, which the data supports, is that native plants usually support more biodiversity. They co-evolved with local insects. But there is a huge nuance. The studies found that non-native plants play a really specific, crucial role, especially late in the season. We're talking September, October, when a lot of native blooms are fading.
The hunger gap.
That's it. The insects are still active, but their food is running out. The study highlighted plants like lavandula, that's lavender and geranium species. These are non-native there, but they get huge numbers of visits from pollinators in the autumn.
And there's a specific character in this story, a particular bee.
Yes. Bombus pascurum, the common carder bee.
So tell me about this little guy.
This bee is a generalist. It's not a picky eater. In the Glasgow study, This one species accounted for 25% of all pollinator interactions they observed.
A quarter of all interactions. That's a massive market share for one bee.
It is, and the data shows that this bee switches over to the non-native plants in the autumn. It adapts. So gardens with those non-natives are basically a bridge, helping these bees survive the winter.
So non-native plants aren't inherently evil. They can be functional. But there is a downside to this, which the source calls functional homogenization. And I love that term, even if it does sound a bit scary.
It is a bit scary. This is the commercial problem. The study looked at readily available seeds, the stuff you buy at the big box store. The industry prioritizes flowers that are easy to mass produce.
McFlowers of the world, the fast food of the plant kingdom.
In a way, yes. The study found that it takes fewer of these readily available plants to support the common pollinators, like our friend the common carder bee. But this completely misses the specialists.
Right, so we end up with the same few flower types everywhere. And that's fine for the generalist bees, but the rare specialist pollinators, the ones that need one specific native plant, they're just out of luck.
Exactly. We're creating a landscape that's great for the common, but terrible for diversity. We are homogenizing the insect population by homogenizing our gardens.
Which is a perfect segue to the mechanism driving all that, the business of blooming. Because flower power isn't just a slogan or a biological reaction, it is a massive industry.
Oh, it is. And we have the perfect case study. There's literally a company called Flower Power in Australia.
I love that they kept the name. It's like, yeah, we know the slogan, we're trademarking it.
And they started in 1968, right in the middle of the movement. But while the hippies were protesting, these guys were building a retail empire.
And this is not just some roadside stand we're talking about.
No. This is Australia's largest garden center chain. The source details a $30 million investment by the CEO just to modernize one store.
$30 million. What does a $30 million garden center even look like?
It looks like pure efficiency. They have retractable roofs controlled by weather systems, but the real innovation is in the service. They have something called a potting factory.
A potting factory.
Yep. You buy a plant, you buy a pot, and they pot it for you right there on the spot for free. It's about removing all the friction.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
It's making gardening instant. You don't have to go home, get dirt under your fingernails, make a mess.
Exactly. They realize the modern consumer wants the effect of the flower, that neurological calm we talked about, without all the labor. And they didn't just stop at plants. They lobbied the government to change the definition of garden center.
To include what?
Cafes, fresh produce, pet shops. They copied the European model where the garden center is a destination. You go for brunch, you buy a fern, you get a coffee. It's an experience.
It's interesting how they professionalized it. The source also mentioned their training program.
Yes, the Alara learning source. They realized their staff couldn't just be kids who like plants. They needed real leadership skills, so they implemented a diploma of leadership and management.
A diploma for working at a nursery.
With an 85% completion rate, they understood that flower power in a business context means upskilling your people. It's about operational excellence. It's a long way from the free love vibe of the 60s.
It really is. It's the corporatization of that biophilia effect. They're selling us that neurological calm, but with retractable roofs and efficiency algorithms.
And high margins. We have to touch on the fundraising aspect, too, because this really drives home the economics.
Oh, right. The flower power fundraising source.
Ugh, this is such a clever business model. You know how school fundraisers usually sell candy or cookie dough?
Right. Unhealthy stuff.
This platform flips it. They sell flower bulbs. It's eco-friendly, it's positive, but look at the numbers. They offer a 50% profit margin to the schools. That is incredibly high. And they offer a 100% grow guarantee.
So if the bulb doesn't grow, they replace it.
Which tells you how reliable this business has to be. If you're selling hope, which is what a flower bulb is, it has to work. You can't sell a dud. They have engineered nature to be predictable.
So let's try to pull all this together. We started with Allen Ginsberg and the Vietnam War. We went through the human brain, the feeding habits of a specific bee, and ended up in a high-tech Australian retail complex.
It's been a journey.
But the thread running through it all is this biological lever. Flower power. As a slogan, it worked because of biology. Ginsberg intuited that flowers hack the human brain. They make us calmer, happier, less aggressive.
And that same biological attraction is what drives the bee to the lavender in September. And it's what drives the consumer to the garden center on a Saturday morning.
We are, in a way, just like the bees. We see the signal, the color, the scent, and we change our behavior.
We are. Whether you're a CEO looking for innovation, a homeowner planting a garden, or an activist, you are using that same deep evolutionary connection.
But there is a warning here, too. And I want to go back to that ecological study for our final thought.
The homogenization issue.
Exactly. The study showed that when we just rely on what is readily available, the commercial seeds, the mass-produced plants, we get functional homogenization. We get a world that looks green, but it's biologically very simple. It supports the common bugs, but the rare ones just die out.
It's a powerful metaphor.
In the 1960s, flower power was about radical individuality. It was about being different. It was about letting 100 flowers bloom.
And today, the commercial version of flower power is often about uniformity. The same hydrangeas in every yard. The same perfectly potted plant.
So here's the question for you listening. In your life, in your interaction with nature, or even in your business, are you promoting diversity? Are you planting the weird, difficult native plants that support the rare specialists? Or are you just buying the readily available mix because it's easy?
Are you supporting the ecosystem or just the aesthetic?
That is the question. Think about that the next time you see a flower shop. Thanks for diving in with us. See you next time.